Welcome to Immersed. Immersed is a series around music, health, wellness, and technology. Each episode, we bring together a diverse array of perspectives to explore how music and sound can improve our lives. Immersed is brought to you by Studio Feed. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Behind the Curtain. My name is Daedelus, and I'm joined today by Anna Morgan and Jon Casey. Lots of time zones and lots of reasons to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to pull aside some of the preconceived ideas of what it is to music and what it is to be a musician. It's 2022, and I don't know about y'all, but it doesn't make the most amount of sense. Whatever through thread was from the previous decade doesn't quite feel like that's where we're headed towards. And I really wanted to have this conversation with you both about where your heads are at and what kind of made your journey thus far possible. And then if we have time to get into what's ahead for you both, and by virtue of your own leadership positions, like what else is happening in the larger world of our tiny slice of music and the huge implication of like just sound. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, can we start with you, Anna? Just kind of
Sure.
what it was that brought you here, not just here, of course, but like to music. Like, what was the clarion call? What was the
Oh, I'm just a raver that's never grown up, essentially. I just love music, and I started going to raves when I was like 14, like super young. I was actually a kid that was dealing with like heavy depression.
Hmm.
And when I found the rave scene, I found for the first time a sense of community, a sense of like feeling connected. Music really helped me do that, like just freedom on the dance floor. I was a dancer for a long time. So connecting to music and having that connection through my body, being in space with community and other people, like this really inspired me and honestly like saved my life.
Hmm.
I don't know that I would still be here. I struggled a lot at that period, at that time, and I don't know that I like would still be here if not for finding something that made me feel connected. So yeah, I would say in music saved my life. But,
I
that's
mean,
why I'm so devoted to it.
that's beautiful, but a lot of people, they sustain on one side of the dance floor and they don't get on the other. They don't turn the tables, quite literally. How did you find yourself then propagating? How did you find yourself like producing and
So
being?
I have a really different journey from most of my friends who are working in music. Because I was known as a dancer, promoters enlisted me to help them promote parties, and then I realized that I really liked organizing and helping to organize events, and I really love, and probably still my favorite thing right now is curation. More than I actually love producing or DJing. I love, like, to me, it's like meta DJing when you get to like put a lineup together. Um, and I really like creating platforms for artists that I love to shine. Like, this is the thing that brings me the most joy when it comes to music now. I realize that while I'm working with music as a medium, both as an artist and as an avenue for like industry, and like my income is coming from music, but I'm really like a people person. Like, people for me come first, and so I'm very like community oriented. And so that's really what excites me. And then music just happens to be like, I guess, the avenue that like I've been able to find that resonates with me the most in terms of organizing people to come together and sharing mutual interests and passions. So basically what happened was people started asking me to promote. I started throwing parties with my friends when I was super young. I moved to Hawaii as my mom got sick. She got breast cancer. So I left New York, moved to Hawaii. There, I moved in with like a crew of fire dancers. I used to be a fire performer. I moved in with a crew of fire dancers and started connecting with a lot of flow community that way, and then organizing events. And I actually had no intention of DJing or producing at all. Like, I just thought like this is my role, and kind of like what you said, people are often on one side or the other. Um, What happened was I saw a really good friend of mine DJing, and at the time we weren't friends at all. It was my first time I saw him DJ. He played several tracks that I loved that I'd never heard on a system before. And I never heard anyone, I never imagined someone could put them in the same set. And so I just immediately was like, whoa, if I was going to DJ, maybe it would sound something like this. So it really kind of lit something in me. And I became friends with that person. And once we were having tea and hanging out, and he was like, why don't you DJ? And I was like, we have way more than enough DJs in our community. We don't need more DJs. And he was like, yes, we have a lot of DJs, but we don't have women in bass music. And I think that you have something unique to offer to the conversation. And he was like, you only need 20 tracks to make a mix. He's like, I know you collect music. I was like, how do you know? And he's like, because every time I play a song, I'm really a bad train spotter. Like he was like, every time I play a song that you don't know what it is, you literally will come up and take a photo of it, which is what I did before I knew that maybe that was rude. I was just like, what is this? Like I would get really excited. And I've also said to people, I don't know. There was a period of time where I didn't really even want to claim the title DJ. I would just be like, I'm just someone that's excited about music and wants to share it with people. Like that's what I'm doing here. And
Isn't that the universal though? Isn't that like the, just having that enthusiasm that actually like gets into the speakers? That's at essence what a DJ is doing. And it sounds like you got caught up in the upflow. I mean, you already were checking for the music, and then to be part of the culture. Of course, I want to bring you all the way forward. It sounds like that was a really relevant moment for you, though, in the midst of maybe some greater kind of shadow work, if you want to say, or some difficulties going on. It sounds like the music maybe hit you on a few occasions like that. Maybe before we continue too much more with that part of the story, Jon, let's get you involved as well. I know you're a younger voice, but built of maybe similar enthusiasms. Can you speak to your journey thus far, to the things that got you here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of enthusiasms behind everything. I was born into a musical, I would say musical family, but nothing classically trained. My mom sang in the church. My dad used to sing with her. He used to play guitar as well. I mean, you can literally see little sax. This is my dad's little mini cinema. It was the only place I could find to actually do this. But yeah, like saxophones and all this kind of stuff. So very musically inclined family. So I grew up listening to Lionel Richie, Eric Clapton, all those like musical, when it comes to that kind of stuff, Aaron Neville. So I've always loved anything with a beat, since I was a kid. My dad used to tell me this story where I was a kid and I'd sleep and he'd play some music and I'd wake. I'm like 3 or 2 and I'd literally wake up and I'd ask him, Daddy, can I dance? And he's like, yeah. And then I'd just dance in the back of the car. So it was definitely innate, and this path was destined. Growing further into it, my brother used to listen to Pendulum, obviously back in like 2008. We heard it in a game called Motorstorm on the PlayStation, and there was this track in the beginning and we were like, ooh, and then it goes into drum and bass, and that was like the first time we really got into drum and bass, apart from like DJ Fresh and Calix and TB and those kind of things. So that was the drum and bass side that was given to us. And we were these South African boys, like no one was listening to this stuff at all. And my neighbor put us on to Apparat. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with, yeah. So I was literally in grade 4 listening to Walls, and that's by far top 3 favorite albums of mine of all time. And that was sort of the electronic side. And then I got into it a little bit more. That's what sort of tickled my curiosity with this music thing, and it seemed a little bit more in reach when it was electronic. Learning the piano and learning the guitar and that kind of stuff didn't really, that bug didn't bite me. It was the electronic side of things. So then in grade 8, I got FL Studio just out of the blue and then started producing, making the worst beats you could ever hear ever. But it was super fun. And I remember showing my brothers the first beat I made, and I was so excited, and I was expecting them to be as excited as I was. And they listened to this and they were like, okay, and then just carried on doing what they wanted to do. And I was like, oh. But what was really cool is I was in high school in grade 8, and I was talking about FL Studio, and this little short black kid comes through, walks next to me, and he overhears, he's like, FL Studio? And I'm like, yeah, FL Studio. And he's like, oh yeah, I use FL Studio too. And I'm like, okay, cool. Turns out it's Chi. Uh, so him and I were in the same high school, and from then we were best friends ever since. We got the same plugins, we pirated all the same software, all that kind of stuff in the beginning. You know how kids are. And I just never looked back. I kind of looked at it as a hobby up until 2017.
Mm.
In 2017, I had an EP, and she and I have our project called It Hurts, and we released stuff in Noisia, dropped it on a lot of their radio stations, and that's how Craze heard about us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, Craze likes It Hurts, so let me just send him some of my stuff, and he liked it, and then he wanted to release it on Slow Roast, his label, and I've never looked back ever since. It was a linear progression into this industry.
Yeah, the kind of predestination almost. It sounds like you were already dancing, already had the kind of sound in you, but then at the same time, for both of you, and this is where we can kind of direct this back towards you both. You both are movement, like you both are dancers. To the degree that when you're behind the turntables, can you embody as much as you would from the floor? Is that even a possibility of having that kind of like, because here's the thing, when you're DJing or you're producing, you know more than your audience does, and the reveal is part of the act, right? Part of the performance is what you decide to
Good
show,
point. I never thought of it
decide to
like that.
hide. And when you kind of give it fully, and versus when you're just that little bit of restraint, and the tracks that are going to do that are going to ignite, or kind of where the breakdown is. And those choices are it's like you have to kind of be juggling all that, spinning all those wheels at the same time. So can it be as much fun to be on our side of the stage versus being off stage and having all the surprises and seeing where down the rabbit hole the DJ is going to lead us?
Oh no, you can go.
I am a fan first. So I'm definitely someone who has a lot more fun when I'm on the dance floor. It's just I think like the most fun I have when I'm on stage is actually like when or like it's usually not when I'm on a stage, but it's when I'm on the same floor as the audience. I don't actually love
Absolutely.
like when you're up
No.
high on a stage and
Distant, far from it.
yeah, especially sometimes at festivals, like people are like behind these
Hey,
police things and
rails.
they're like
Yeah.
all the way over there and you're like, I can barely see them, I can't feel them, so yeah, usually like a small like club setting or like a house party where like your friends are all around you and you're just playing the tracks that like make people, especially the girls, like shake their booties. Like that's when I feel the most myself and I'm having like the best time.
Hey, us guys shake our booties too.
Sure. I mean, I'm
I'm
not mad
joking.
at
I'm
that,
joking.
but I do actually, I'll say honestly that I do sort of like aim specific tunes that I'll play like at the women present. Not that the dudes don't shake the booties.
No, 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 of course.
But if
I
the girls
respect
are
that
shaking
though.
their booties, everybo's shaking their booties. Like the guys follow suit. So I kind of
Yeah,
direct my
yeah.
energy at them to
Men,
be
women, and
Mhm.
all the genders in between, and
yeah.
genders that don't even exist.
True.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but that I
Absolutely.
I think there is some kind of science about, if you can, with your knowledge, your intimacy, and just being able to aim that audio somewhere, even though it's just coming out of the same speakers, that intention I think comes through. And so if that's your intention, if that's your goal, and you're achieving that, then that's a
Yeah.
tidal wave. Yeah.
I have to say, I get good feedback from people that they get what I'm doing, especially like, there's some of the early tracks that I put out were actually specifically just, I was like, I'm like, I was being asked for, so basically I started making edits and like that eventually led me into labels asking me for tunes. And when what I was doing was I was playing and DJing a lot in like the sort of like 160 footwork juke club circuit. And I was realizing that a lot of the tracks, if they had vocals, they were always kind of just it, you know, like I love like booty house and I love ghetto tech, like love it, right? And the lyrics are generally about like dancing or like having sex, and these to me like the club atmosphere, the dance floor, like this is part of that ritual. You know, there is a lot of this like this game, you know, of like courting this kind of stuff, right? This energy. So, but I realized that all of these tunes that I was like loving and playing, that they were all like written by dudes. And often if they were speaking directly to women, that they would say things that could be considered a little misogynistic.
Absolutely.
It was never like a woman's voice speaking to the women present. And so I made a conscious choice to do that.
Mhm.
And I have had throughout the years a lot of women give me feedback, other DJs, producers, or just girls in the crowd, that they felt seen and they felt heard, and they were like, oh, you're like with us. And I'm like, yeah, like that was a big, you know, for me, not initially coming into this first as an artist, but first as a promoter, then a DJ, then a producer. Still, a lot of the things that I was doing earlier and even now still relate directly to the audience and like who's listening, what space this is being received in, what I want to say to them, and why.
Mhm.
You know?
Are you familiar with, I'm going to get the name wrong, but the Bechdel test? Have you heard this before in regards to
No.
movies? It has to do with, and this is a little bit more, there's more rules to it, but the Bechdel test is when you see a film and there's no female characters that actually have like an honest conversation with another female character
Mm-hmm.
about things that aren't about like the male
Men.
protagonist. Yeah, exactly. Where men aren't basically being conjured or like presumed always in the space. And there should be a Bechdel test just in
In
general for
music.
the dance floor, yeah, because it's like music shouldn't have necessarily any gender assigned. And yet you're absolutely right. The people writing the tracks
Mm.
come from certain points of view. The people propagating those tracks have certain points of view, as we've seen all too often in our communities. And we can kind of get into that wider conversation about like, what are we doing and what are we saying and what are we propagating when we display sometimes what is the fire track, but with, you know, questionable lyric, tough. Sometimes the music is aimed to the wrong place, and even if you want to even reduce it down to like some of the frequencies used, it's like, are we actually being really conscious of what we're conjuring and propagating? But maybe a little later. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I do want to push this back towards you, John, because I feel like, yeah, I mean, I feel like there is some perspectives being mined and kind of leveraged here, and so you're coming from the outside looking in. You know, if Anna, you're kind of like coming from the dance floor and being like kind of lifted up to then like make your edits and then get involved. What does it feel like to be coming from South Africa, which is not necessarily, it's not known for bass music until you've come along and she's come along. But it sounds like you were both, you were, I don't know how many people at your high school were also, or your school were like really involved in this, but it sounds like it's you. You're the scene, it sounds like. I mean, at least the way you
Mm.
described it.
Let me not throw anybody else under the bus, but there were a few people that showed us like Casper and Rusco. There was this one kid named Sergio. He did like hella drugs. He would come to school on shrooms and stuff like that. Not knocking him, but it was funny. I was a kid and I was like, this is crazy. And he'd come through and just he showed us there was the famous Casper and Rusco mix with like Jehovah and Africa something and
Africa
those
High Tech. And
dubstep, wah, 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 wah. And he showed us that and we were like, what is this? And we were literally that's when we got put onto it. But coming from the outside perspective, I think I really love where Anna is coming from. um I know I'm totally different. Being For me, I I'm on when I'm on the stage, I think, and I'm not saying she disagrees or this is not where she comes from, but for me, I live to be behind the decks. Like I live for that. I live for curating music. I live for making people, like, if you give me energy, I'm giving you 199%, because I think I feed off of that energy on during my sets. And this is a very important caveat, but for anybody watching and all of us, we need to understand that the DJ is never just the person curating the energy. The crowd needs to provide that. And I've ran into many, and I'm pretty sure all of you can agree, crowds that are, it's almost like an entitled spirit where it's like, or entitled energy where it's like, okay, you're coming to give me the vibes, give me the vibes. and that's it. And they're standing there and waiting for the music to like play and stuff, and it's off from the beginning. But if there's people that are feeling the energy and feeling the music, doesn't matter what it is, obviously playing for the correct crowd adds on to that. But I think those moments, like, I will forget that I'm getting paid for this. Like, I'll be playing a show and I'll have so much fun, and at the end someone will come through and give me a check, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's money in this type beat. And I just really, really, really love curating music. And as you said, I never looked at it that way, but you have that surprise element. You know what you're going to give the crowd, so you kind of bring it up, and people don't know what they want to hear until they hear it. So that's one thing that's given me a lot of confidence with breaking the barrier of stepping outside of the DJ booth if I can. You know, as you've said, Anna, like with festivals and stuff, when it's so far, it feels so disconnected and it really does throw my energy off. But if I'm able to, you know, step out in front and get people's energy, the knowing the fact that people don't know what they want to hear until they hear it has given me a lot of confidence to break that barrier. Because if I think, okay, let me step out in front now, and I get anxious, I'm like, okay, there's even more reason to do it, because if I don't do it now, I'm just going to overthink it. But that performative aspect, when I'm watching shows and stuff, I really, really, really need to be a big fan. But for the most part, and this is just my perspective, but I'm not going to go to a show unless I'm playing, kind of thing, because I think it's also, you can get jaded with the club life and stuff like that. And if it's not, like, if it's Chi, for example, Chi was the only set that I fully watched at the Ants, and I was going buck the whole time. But him and I are like this, so I know what he's going to play. I love the music that he plays. And I sort of gave that energy. But other than that, it's really just all contained for when I give people an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that's pretty much how I see the whole thing.
You know, you bring up an interesting point, and I think this is for all of us to consider, is that mitigation, the control of your energy for the release. And so we can talk about it from a musical standpoint about what you're doing in the music, but also just from yourself as a person on that stage, commanding presence, potentially elevated, removed, all these things, and you have to fill in those blanks. Maybe you're sourcing from a deep well of understanding what it's like to be out on the floor and being a dancer in the circle or whatever. I mean, and when you bring up footwork, it's like, I remember when I first discovered that scene, I played with DJ Sluggo in 2006, if you can believe it, like maybe 2005. It was ages ago, and Sluggo's kind of a controversial figure in the footwork scene, but certainly a Chicago legend in their own regard. And just like, I mean, to be quite frank, it wasn't the most interesting footwork, but the dancers brought it. They just were so living it that it was just like, it transformed my understanding of 160 at that time to something wholly beautiful and new. But that all being said, it's like you're controlling and mitigating your energy, and you probably, you know, I don't know if you're playing at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 8 p.m., whatever it is, and you just have to kind of both honor the position you're playing, your opening or closing or whatever, but you also have to, you know, bring the show that you're doing. What is those other 23 hours of the day? What do you, how do you make sure that you are the conduit at the right time, or do you just know that it's going to be there? Not to just open the floor.
Okay.
But if, yeah.
So I like, you know, when I first started DJing, I was DJing like 5-6 times a week in New York City. Like, because all my friends were DJs and producers, I kind of instantly had a career once I started DJing, which is also unusual. And so I was playing for a lot of different audiences and a lot of like open format sets, like bars, clubs, you know, birthday parties, all these different sort of settings with a lot of different kinds of people. And because my objective is to make people dance, like, and it's something that I haven't, like, I'm a DJ first, like corporate stuff, all kinds of stuff, right? So so for me, it's really just very much about being present and open to what's happening in that room. I actually do show up and catch at least the set that was happening before me, so that I have an opportunity to kind of gauge what the crowd is actually reacting to. Like, oh, it seems like this crowd like really understand. They like their trap. They like their 808. Okay, oh, this crowd really likes Four on the Floor, you know, like, okay. And so like with that feedback, I don't actually plan my sets. I wait until I'm present and I know I have the tools I have with me, you know, and I know like what's going to hit when, and like, but it really depends on who's present. So it's for me a lot of like listening, you know, to the space that I'm in, to the crowd that I'm in, and then figuring out in the moment what the best thing like in my arsenal is going to be to bring them to where I want to be, whether that's, you know, feeling really sexy or like feeling really hard, you know, like I do play a lot of music that makes people feel like a badass. Like I like that energy, you know. I like to bring people that sense of confidence when they're in their space. And I also like things that just make people be like, what the hell is this? You know, like I love that, where they're just like a little confused and you just throw them off for a minute before you bring them back home to something that they're like, okay, cool. I get this, you know, I get this basic, like, you know, beat. But so, yeah, I feel like it really is just getting myself to be in a place that's, you know, present. So I usually have on my rider that I need a warm meal like before I'm in the club. And if they don't give me that, I at least like, you know, I'll go make sure that I have, usually it's like soup or something like that. I spend some time before the gig, maybe organizing music a little bit, but I'm usually alone and like with quiet until I have to go to the club. Maybe there's like one or two people around. I often decline like the dinner invites and stuff before the set so that I can just have space to, you know, kind of feel my ground and like feel in myself. And that way I know that when I show up to the club to work, like I'm on and I'm present.
That sounds like a 4 or 5 hour run up, though. If you're talking about catching the set, having a good meal, being able to like look through the music, that's work. I mean,
Yeah.
this is full time job kind of stuff, obviously. But
Yeah. And I do like, I'm one of those people who will try to get to the city if possible, like as early as possible. Like I'll try to get to where I'm playing like the night before if it's possible. So if it's a Friday, I'll usually be there like either earlier in the day or like Thursday night. It's not always possible. Sometimes you have to go to a different city Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you know, but I do try that. And then if you're just on the plane, it's just a lot of napping, usually as much sleep as
if you can
possible.
sleep on the plane, that's a gift. That's
I'm really
wonderful.
short, so it works out for me.
That's the secret. Just
Yeah.
get short. Nice. But still, that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of work you're doing. That's obviously it's the unpaid work. It's I mean not obviously if it's something you like to do that's different. But it's like it's interesting, right? Like you're putting in time to make sure the night is what you need it to be, what they want it to be, with the expectation space. But that's a lot. You're putting a lot on your shoulders on that. Maybe it doesn't feel that way, and I don't mean to presume. It's just counting it. It's just there's a lot of people who don't care as much as you do. We know these people. They show up 15 minutes late for their set. They didn't catch anything. But not to call anything out. Just it's interesting. I find it remarkable and something to think about. Um, yeah, and this begs another question though, and then I don't want to cheat you the opportunity, John, to also contribute maybe what your practice might be in the kind of lead up and run up, but it really asks this other question, Anna, that you're kind of already priming, which is what do you do with that energy once you've summoned it? You have this badass, sometimes sexy, it sounds like, hard as nails, confusing, all these different emotions that you've brought up, and obviously for the audience, they're just gonna like the set's going to finish, they might catch another, and then they're out, they're done, they're on to their next adventure, they're off to bed, and you have to sit with all that stuff, like the results of it, the resonance. Does it last with you? Do you get earworms? Does it kind of continue? Does it just stop as soon as the music stops?
Um, I mean, generally after a show, depending on what I have to do the next day, if I have to like, like fly, like this, sometimes you have to just go to the airport right after the show, and it's kind of tight. But at that point, it's usually for me a lot about that's when I'll socialize. Like I said, I'll kind of turn down usually invites to hang out pre-show because I just need to be alone. But then once I'm in the club and like once the show, like I'm done with the set, usually I dance if there's a set after. That's like just helps me move a lot of that energy, like excess energy. Because if there's not a set after me and I don't get to dance, like I'll be wired, like I won't be able to rest or sleep. And usually I'm playing in the evenings, like pretty late at night. So it's like it's usually like a social. After that, I'm just like talking to people, meeting the people who came to see you, talking to the promoters, the people at the club, kind of trying to get as much of a vibe, like soak up as much of a vibe of whatever city I'm in, and just like who's there and why are they there, that kind of thing. I'd say like for me, a lot of it is about just like socializing and like the people usually after.
And if that does it, if that does the magic trick, it makes sense. It's kind of nice. You manifest something and then you deal with the results. That kind of makes sense to me.
I mean, a lot of times, yeah, like I would be at like, kind of like Jon was saying, like he's like, I'm there like to do my thing, and I'm like, I'm usually there, I'm kind of like, sure, I'm excited about my set, but I know what I'm gonna play. That's not that interesting to me. What is really interesting to me is like hearing what other people are bringing, their perspectives, why, like an opportunity to discover someone new, or like new music or something. I'm usually always like, that's the thing that excites me the most is like new artists, new people. Like when I go to a festival, I often will try to figure out who's local and like and see what they're doing. And a lot of times those are my favorite sets because a lot of the big headliners, I've seen them already. I kind of know what they're already going to do. So yeah, I like surprises and I like discovery and I like people.
We're in a people industry, so that's good. That's handy. It isn't always the case, obviously. A lot of producers are known for their antisocialness that actually got them to the music in the first place, but that's not to presume anything.
I mean, I was gonna say like I think one of the big differences here, like I would say I classify Jon like as a producer, like I just do it mostly because people ask me to, which is very different.
I
Like,
appreciate the excuse you're putting forward, but the position you've risen to as being a selector and a DJ and someone with ears, I mean, and not to contradict you, but it's like you now you have many hats you're wearing, and
oh
people certainly
sure.
see you as being someone who provides that in like in all the ways.
Sure. But I'm saying that the perspective is a bit different in that, like, I would say, like, my homies that are producers, they have their sound and their craft that they've spent years, like getting that craft, that sound locked. They have a thing that they're going to present. They know when they show up, they're like, I'm doing me, right? And so I feel like, energetically, as Jon was saying, there's that element of conversation, but it's a little less of a conversation. It's more like I've created a gift for you and here it is, right? And like you're going to react to that however you want. So as someone that's more of like like you're like DJ, I show up and the set's different just based on who's in the room and what I feel and how moody I am. It's not necessarily based around my own catalog. Although obviously I will include a lot of my label's catalog because I do want to push the artists that I represent. But yeah, it's usually just like, this is what I'm into that makes sense in this moment versus like, here's a bunch of work that I've made and I really want you to hear this. It's kind of a different, it's the focus I think is a little different in a way,
We would all do very well to think in those terms, though, of rather than just the songs and those unit of like when the drop's happening, but and also in the overall kind of messaging. Is it sexy? Is it making people feel badass? Is it making them feel empowered? I think a lot of producers could do really well by putting it in the same terms you're talking about.
Mm.
And indeed, I think producers kind of get lost in the technical know-how, the plugins of whatever sound is fizzing, whatever BPM is happening, and not necessarily what it's actually doing in the speakers. So I feel you. Jon, before we get this towering amount, can you speak a little bit to your run up and your dissipation of all this energy? It sounds like you really are bringing 110%, 140%. I've seen you going wild on stages, especially it was a brownies and lemonade show that was really like, yeah, it just really caused a big splash, a big wave.
Mhm.
Talk to me about that. What does it take to do 110% and maybe a daily basis for shows that
On a daily basis, I think first and foremost, sleep. I really prioritize my sleep as much as I can. I feel I'm very susceptible to anxiety and not being myself if I'm running on low amounts of sleep, because I don't, you know, partake in drugs because that won't help anything either. But I I try to prioritize my sleep. And before a show, I love the pre-show dinners and just, you know, socializing and sort of warming myself up. Um, and same. Just remembered what Anna said was, um, it's about the curation of the vibes. You know, I know, or I'm gonna kind of test the water. You know, I'm gonna play some stuff that I generally have. I have a golden thread, but I'm flexible as well. You know, I like see, okay, they like the four on the floor stuff. I've got a little bit more of this, and now I see, because I think it's really, really, really important as a DJ, and Anna will agree, is you to know your music, like know it. Don't just listen to it. Like know the songs you're gonna play, understand what you can join with certain things. So it's sort of testing the waters all the time. If the energy is big all the time, then I'll just do whatever I want. You know, if everyone's just enjoying everything, then I'll just enjoy it. But if I see that they're kind of slowing down when it comes to like the harder dubstep stuff, then I'll go to the trap stuff, or I'll do a little bit more four on the floor or footwork or whatever it is. I've got as you were saying earlier, just an arsenal of stuff that is still being built. You know, I'm still curating and still working on these things. But so before the shows, I like to do the pre-show dinner. If I can't, then you know, I'll have a few drinks just to get social. Because if I'm social and, you know, loose, then I'm, you know, a little bit more, a little less nervous. Um, but I had it where I was a minute late for my set. There was something wrong with the parking lot, boom, something, and I ran in. And as soon as I ran in, I was running off of that adrenaline, and I just used that. Which is pretty funny. It was kind of like a different perspective for me to have, like, okay, cool, instead of drinking before a show, just be late. But yeah, I'd obviously take the former. But on stage, when I'm playing that kind of energy, I try my best to, beforehand, I always try to have not low expectations, but I try to have no expectations, because I always think, you know, if I'm gonna have the best show ever and it's horrible, I feel, not that it throws me off too much to the point where I'm not myself, but it's just really, really, sometimes I take that personally, which I shouldn't. Like if I have a really bad show, and I played a show somewhere 2 weeks ago and it was the worst show I've ever played. But it was just more so like the venue unprepared, the people were just robots staring at me, and I'm one to get on the mic and, you know, prompt people and say, yo, what's up, how you guys feeling, blah blah blah. I have this whole spiel that I do, and it gets, you know, engagement. But when it doesn't, it's like complete silence, like radio silence. It hits me, like it hits me deep. I'm like, yo. And then I'm nervous. When I'm nervous, I can't DJ well. Like when I'm not thinking, I have my best sets. It was the G Jones, Mr. Carmack, Ivy Lab, and me. We played a show in Atlanta.
And that
A
was the
month.
bad show? No.
No. This
I
is
was gonna be
this was
like,
no, that wasn't the
that
bad
sounds
show.
like everything should be a go for
Sorry,
that one. But
sorry.
yeah, I mean, okay.
Period. Next sentence. So I was playing a show with G Jones, Mr. Carmack, Ivy Lab, and me, and that was probably one of the best shows I've ever played. Energy was good. I was early. It was a very early set, so I had to, you know, obviously adjust. But afterwards, I went to an after party where everyone was, and there were, you know, decks, and they were like, "Yo, do you guys want to DJ or whatever?" So Carmack and I went back to back for like what I thought was an hour. It was like 2.5 hours because we were having so much fun. And I was just playing Afro beats, gom, I'm a piano, house, all these kind of garage, this kind of stuff. And I was tired after my set, and I was just invigorated, or I just had so much energy because I was playing other stuff now, and people were enjoying it, and we were singing along to the words. We played like Potion by Ludacris and all that kind of stuff. So if the music and the vibe allows it, I will always give 110%. It's very easy for me to do that. I don't need any stimulants or any prerequisites or anything after. Doesn't matter. It's just the energy has to be there for me to work off of it. Um and it's fun at the end of the day. But I do think I need to take a leaf out of Anna's book, because I don't go looking a lot. I have this principle that works for me, and I would probably think works for maybe a few other people, but I really feel like music finds me, and it finds everyone. It finds you in its own way. But I feel when I go looking and searching, I don't really find like a lot of the things that I really think I would play 24/7, because that's what I can do. I can just, if I like a song, I can play it 24/7 and not ruin it for myself. And I think I have as we all do, a high standard for the music that we enjoy, but it's very difficult for songs to break that standard for me, for it to make it into my sets, unless it's like a filler or something. But Anna and I were actually having this conversation when I saw her, what was it, 2 weeks ago or something. But it's also curating the vibes is very important, and freestyling is also very important. It's not just like I'm gonna go here and play whatever I want. Like if they like house and you were like, screw them, they don't like house, or if they like house, I'm gonna play something different just to show them. I mean, we're still DJs, we're still curating vibes and stuff like that. So I like to have enough music to still pertain to like, for example, the G Jones show. I know there's a lot of more bass heavy people, and I like that music too. It's not like I'm playing things I don't like. It's just I think it's a very responsible thing to do for DJs, is to play things that people that are provoking, like, in a sense.
You bring up an interesting point, and I think this is something that's relevant for all of us. There is this idea that we're in a service industry, music, and being in service of a greater ideal, but there is this contrary idea that it's like you are also social, branded performers of it could be a open format, but they're still booking you for your name, your sounds, your perspectives in your back pocket. How do you reckon that with having these kind of open format, these kind of wider ideas, and yet also still being an entity that they want to reduce down to, like, the font on the flyer? You're getting people in the room not because they think you're going to play anything, but they think you're going to play the thing that they think you're going to play, which of course can be not can be in a lot of discordance.
Yeah, it's definitely walking a tightrope, for real. It's a tightrope between the who you think you are as a brand, because it's still something I'm figuring out. I love to play music that I love, and I'm still trying to get comfortable with playing the music that I make. If it's just stuff that if I make the song, I've had people scream like, yo, play this song, and I'm like, I sometimes don't really like the music I make, right? But I'm still figuring out who I am, because it was stuff I released years ago, and I'm still figuring out my stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I'm being honest, I don't like some stuff that I've released in the past, and it doesn't have the same energy that, for example, there's a song that I hear on SoundCloud, I'm like, oh, I'd love to play this. My music doesn't, to me at least, doesn't resonate like that. But I'm still trying to break out of that cast of people came to see Jon Casey as well. So I need to be able to play my music the way that it's intended to be heard. Um, and as you've said, it's walking a tightrope. But I would love to, let's say altruistically, I would love to get to a point where if I played an all original set, I can jam to it the way I would play a set with, Christian stuff, cheese stuff, Hamdi stuff, G Jones, all these kind of like different kinds of music. Because as a producer, you've heard the songs a million times. You've heard your song a million times, and you have to have that. And you can get jaded. And when you do, when you're on stage, it's a different vibe, because now it's obviously playing it in front of a bunch of people. So there's two things: either it's exciting or it's nerve-wracking. So that's how, like, it's juggling or walking that tightrope, is between, you being booked for this kind of stuff, but then I think it's just provoking is a good word in this case. Provoking the promoters to be like, listen, I'm still someone who enjoys music. I will play the music that I enjoy, but I'll also play what I was booked for. Provoking the crowd to be like, okay, I didn't know I want to hear this, I don't know what that is, but if 5 people can walk away, one person walks away like, what was that? I'm gonna go look for that. Like, you've done your job. at least, you know?
I hear you and I feel you, but I do think there's a little fear of success in what you're speaking on. And again, not to challenge you in this notion, with the
Elaborate.
idea, well, just in the sense that like the 1 out of 5 idea, one person might be having like a revelation, the other 4 people are having an experience as well. It's not to negate their experience, but it does sound a little bit like, as you are figuring yourself, as we're all figuring ourselves, like why would you not just go to joy at all times? It's like, of course, there's this kind of larger negotiation and bargaining with like an idea of ourselves, and we're in motion, and usually that motion is faster than the audience is catching up to us. It's just interesting, and
Man.
we have all this stuff
Mm,
to kind of work through in our, like, and a lot of it happens off the stage, a lot of it doesn't happen in front of people, and then at the same time we're louder than most, and we're gonna be have to process this in front of people, and that's tough. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, they're in a dark room for a reason. They're getting other things out, and then we're on stage and it's all lit up. That's And then you're going
mhm,
through some deep stuff sometimes in front of
mhm.
people, playing your music really honestly, or playing other people's music equally honestly, but just from a different offering.
I think that kind of brings it to another point is, balancing that mental aspect of you know solidarity, and being in front of eyes, lots of eyes, and some people find different ways to cope with that. And I was born into a very extroverted and communicative family, and that's not to say somebody who will be extroverted or will work well with people in front of millions of eyes or whatever. There's no method, but I think it really helped me to be able to work with being in front of a bigger room,
Hmm.
and engaging with people when you're in the room, and that kind of stuff. My father was always, like, look people in the eye when you talk to them, greet people when you come into the room, and it's a small thing, and some people might not be able to make the correlation, but I really think that goes a long way for me, because it's kind of like, okay, how do I do that with 500 people? Get on the mic and speak to them, and you don't have to greet every 500 of them, but yo, what's up, people? How you guys doing? And whoever wants to feel involved feels involved. Whoever wants to respond responds. Whoever doesn't. And it's just important that, as you've said, people in a dark room, and some people, let's say a dude who's been producing in his bedroom for 5 years makes a hit song, and now he's Billboard #1. That kind of stuff can take a toll real quick, because the human psyche is weird. It's not really something that you can, you know, figure out at all, but also figuring it out in front of many, many people is a scary and dangerous thing.
I mean, that's music though. It's you're
Literally.
taking your imprint and you're pushing it out onto all these other people, and they resonate with the parts they resonate with, but that precipice, that tightrope walk is, yeah, it wrecks people. We've seen it happen. Yeah. Um and probably there's reasons, again, I get that you have these great origin stories for both of you, this like camaraderie from a dance floor, from another producer, from a community that brought you forward, and then you're DJing. And I like how you both have processes to kind of deal with that stuff. But let's just move it forward. You've now had some years in this industry, both of you, and some experience. How So you've navigated it. How do you aid and assist the people around you to equally benefit not only from your work, but from this kind of the aspects that you're highlighting, this kind of community aspects you're highlighting, in the kind of way you probably already know that there are a lot of people that are interested in making this world theirs, and they don't know how to do it, and they blunder about, they make some mistakes, they make some successes. You both have figured this out to the degree that you're doing it out loud and supporting communities. So could you speak to that a little bit? I just want to make sure I hear that, especially from you, Anna, because you are really a lighthouse when it comes to the label and the work you're doing, communities you're fostering. Um,
Um, for me, basically, once I started to, well, this kind of relates a bit to what you were talking about, navigating that space, or like, I think about like as an artist, what is it that I'm doing? And a lot of that, and this is separate, like from some of the things that I was saying earlier, in terms of like how I work in this space. But as an artist, for me, it's about digging deep and trying to distill like the essence of like, what am I? What am I, and what do I have to offer that's uniquely mine? What gifts have I been given that I'm supposed to share? And then there's that navigation between that and like, well, how do I present that? How do I then make that tangible and present that to the world? And so to me, that's sort of like what the artist thing is, right? And then there's this thing that we're now living in this social media age, and so like that's almost completely at odds with trying to have a career or trying to somehow monetize on that, because you're then trying to create this into a brand, and then you start weighing in people's expectations and their opinions and what's cool and what's hot, and that is that thing that creates that tension, right? Of like, what should I be doing, and is this actually genuinely me, and how do I feel about that, and am I going for the bag or am I being me? And if these things seem quite at odds, they aren't always. Like, we have so many examples of outsiders who just were unapologetically themselves, and maybe they spent years like homie I have so many friends who've spent years clearing dance floors until they just kept making their own personal frequency louder and louder, and then the people that are attracted to that and they feel
Wow.
a sense of resonance, with like, yes, this is me, and like, thank you. So I feel like that is something that we're all sort of constantly navigating, especially in this time where, like, I mean, it can be I don't know if whatever, it can be a head fuck, basically. I don't know how else to say that, to have your whole career and your security, your income being based on whether or not people think you're cool enough to have at their parties. Like, it can really be like, well, because it's like, if they don't, you're not going to get work, and then you have to figure out maybe something else. And so in terms of like, I think for me, if I was just doing this thing where I was just talking about just me and just my process and all that stuff, I honestly would just get bored. And I don't think that I would have been able to have a career that's been sustainable all this time. So initially what happened was I just started throwing parties in New York because I wanted to play whatever I wanted to play. And I wanted to create a space where I could invite my friends to do the same. And I was really not loving some of the way that other promoters were working. I didn't love just certain practices that are very normal to the industry around like how artists are treated and money stuff, all this stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to make my own stuff and do it how it feels good for me, and invite people to partake in that. And I think that that is actually one of the things that probably in all of the industries that I've been involved in, this is like my fourth career, is that creating something that's uniquely yours and also inviting other people to partake in that is something that will always give you a space in whatever the industry is. Because, people are out here, they're thinking like, oh, this, every career I've ever gotten into, I've had someone at the beginning tell me, this is really competitive, like as if to discourage me, because all kinds of people, they don't do what they want to do, and they try to convince you shouldn't either. And so, and I, whatever with those
Preach.
people, but and so literally every career I've ever had, someone has been like, it's so competitive, and I'm like, yeah, but no one is me.
And can I just like resonate with that too? No one's ever told me that before. No one's ever
Really?
been like, yeah, you should watch out. This world's a little
Every
hectic.
career I've ever started, I've had multiple people in the beginning be like, are you sure you want to do that? That's so competitive. That's really hard. Da 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 da.
I mean, it's one thing, of
Interesting.
course, to feel that internally and to know that kind of hunger, but then another thing to have somebody like try to give that to you, like thanks, and that's bullshit. And
Yeah.
Yes.
And for me,
Yeah.
and I would say that those things have only served to strengthen my resolve, because it's made clear to me
Of course.
my response to that, which is basically like, sure, yeah, it is a really competitive industry, and there are lots of talented people out here doing the thing, but none of them are me. And so to me, it's not a direct competition thing. It's just about me trying to make sure that I am working on making my personal frequency loud and connecting with the people that I feel resonate with that, and, creating space for us to do our thing. And I feel like for me, those are the things that have allowed me to have a space, essentially, in the industry.
I mean, you also carved it, so that makes all the sense then too.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of
Recognizing,
what I'm saying. Like, for,
yeah.
is, and even like what you were saying about expectations is, the people who follow me, who have followed me throughout the years, they kind of know when they show up to my set, is I don't know what she's gonna play. And while I know that's a harder path, it's the one that feels authentic to me. And so at some point I just had to be like, I just have to do what feels right to me, or else I'm not going to last.
That's beautiful.
Preach.
If I may say that, it sounds like that kind of origin story where you did get involved a little bit more in the culture because some heavier feelings. I don't know if that's continued, if that's subsided. I know depression, it can be a very individual journey, and there's a lot of sources and reasons. If this did indeed help kind of cure you from that, that's wonderful. Or if it's ongoing, if you would feel comfortable with sharing a little bit how, you know, how that's been reckoned with. Does it feel quieted by the world that you've taken on, or does it feel something like a simmering in the background, or where does it fit?
I would say for quite a while it felt quieted. I mean, I have other tools that I've used throughout my life. By the time I hit my like late teens, I feel like I went through just a lot of tumultuous stuff. I got sent to like a military boarding school. I had a pretty intense kind of high school journey. But all those things have just kind of served to, again, like make clearer sort of my own, whatever that inner compass is, my own inner voice, like make it louder and make it clearer. I think that for me, a lot of the depression really early on, it was about forces and factors that I had no control over. I grew up in a pretty conservative family that was very Christian. I never really resonated with that. So I was at odds with the environment I was in a lot, and with heavy control. Like I didn't learn how to ride a bicycle until I was 21 at Burning Man, because I grew up in a really dangerous part of the Bronx, and my family was really strict and they wanted to protect us. So I went to school and I went to church, and that was it. Like I wasn't allowed out. I didn't have friends. But I will say, even though I'm an extrovert and I'm a really social person, it also created a space where I can sit, like if I'm working on a track, like I will sit with that and be alone in my house, and I can just literally just straight work on that and be alone and like not need people. And, and I think that probably came from being locked in the house, where I had to do activities, or I would paint or read books and stuff like that. So anyways, what I'm saying is that I have therapists, I talk to therapists. I think that's really important. I have been continuously just doing various programs that are asking me to look at myself, my intentions, look at areas of discomfort or pain when they come up, and not feel shame around them, but really look at them as opportunities to grow, like looking at, like, I think a lot of us sometimes, like the depression thing can make people feel down or like judge themselves about like them not being up to or feeling great or being the best version of themselves in the moment. And then that kind of compounds on itself and it becomes worse. What happens for me is once I start to feel a little bit of that like grayness, or that like, that heaviness of depression sort of sink in, it's an automatic like clear sign something needs to shift, something needs to change. So it basically just tells me pay attention. So it's no longer like a, oh no, I'm doomed to this thing. It's just a thing I'm processing at the moment, or a thing I'm dealing with at the moment. Like I don't identify with depression as being like a part of my personality or anything like that. It's just something that I manage, you know? And so yeah, I would say that like I think about these as opportunities to kind of not get attached to what's happening at the moment, but really just to like look at where I'm at, what needs to change, and like, and then just kind of experiment at that point. You know, I've done this enough that I kind of know I have the tools where I'm just like, oh, I really need to just get on my mat right now, or I really need to just like go dance for 5 hours, you know, in a place where I don't know anyone, or just turn on the radio, or like, you know, the whatever, something I really want to jam to, or I really need to have tea with a friend who knows me and can be soft and empathetic with me, or, you know, like, but I would say that the journey has been kind of all over the place for me as an artist. And a lot of that again relates to the factors that I don't have control over, and acknowledging, you know, like working with promoters that maybe, you know, make you feel some type of way, which there can be a lot of that. And especially I represent a part of the industry that there's not a lot of us, and I do navigate honestly more sexism than racism, or at least it feels that way. Sometimes you can't be sure, like, is this person treating me differently because X or Y? But you know, it feels to me like a lot of times it's more about my, you know, just me presenting as a woman, honestly. The stuff that I kind of navigate that will throw me a bit. And then it comes down to, I'll say like the biggest thing that helps me not be depressed in terms of practices when I am feeling that way is reminding myself, this isn't about you. Don't take it personally. You know, don't take it personally. They're being mean to you. They want to let you on the stage you're supposed to perform on. They don't want to like let you, you know, like, 'cause I have had to deal with that kind of stuff where like I show up, I have all my credentials, and they're just like, won't even listen to me. They just assume I don't belong there, you know, like and then that could really throw you, you know, it can really throw you. But then it's just like, this dude's an idiot. It's not about me. It's not about what I look like. Like, it's just like, again, like you know, you can just shrug it off as in like, this doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't know what this person's going through. I hope they get over it. I hope they feel better, but it's not about me. So I would say like that thing, or like sometimes, yeah, like you'll send, even just like sending music to people or something like that and not getting a response. People are busy. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean they hated it or they hate you or they think it's terrible or anything. It just means like, it's not about you in that moment. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you or your music. Maybe they're really busy with whatever they have going on and they'll get back to you when they can. So I'd say that one of the biggest things for me in managing like icky feelings that might lead me to depression is just don't take anything personal, especially in this industry. And I would say gratitude. You know, if I find myself kind of spiraling and like I'm just like feeling kind of bitter, you know, about stuff that's going on, and just remember everything that is going on that is really working out, you know. And there's so much blessings that we all have, just being able-bodied and being able to do this, and just the fact that you can get paid money to play music you love for people, and they're going to have a good time, and you get to have that experience over and over again, is like an insane privilege and blessing. And so, you know, so sometimes it's just focusing on that. And I would say also just like compassion, like having compassion for myself when I'm feeling judgmental, you know, about myself, and having compassion for others. Maybe they're not behaving the ways that you would like or hope them to, you know, just wishing them well.
I like this toolkit. You have a lot of tools. You have a lot of good tactics to deal with what sounds like can be a uncaring and unkind world, but really just individuals, rather than it being like, or at least the way you're presenting it as being like, these are just moments that you're passing through. That's beautiful. And it makes so much sense with your offering then too. Like the way that you are on stage sounds like the way you are off stage. So I really appreciate this insight into you, and that's rad. Although, you know, I do think you're bringing up this idea that the industry has these kind of blind spots slash just like preferences, and then far worse, you know, like people in the industry that are insidious, that are, you know, chauvinists and racists and all this stuff. And you would imagine that if somebody's involved in the nightlife, that they would be kind of open to way different kinds of worldviews and different kinds of personages and like the whole thing. And yet at the same time, you're speaking to what is very present in the world here, and the kind of way that they bring all that stuff to bear, and you have to shoulder that. You have to like navigate that in the immediacy of it. It's a lot. And I'm happy that you're part of what is a response, like a very personal felt response. But then at the same time, like I can't wait for things to get not that way. I can't wait for that to be somehow otherwise. And you're, leading a charge.
Did we just lose John?
I think we might have. South Africa, did that great bit of distance drive things? Well, we're at an interesting moment. We've talked for almost an hour now, and you've brought up some really incredible. It's like one other thing I would just ask you though, and it's like you've brought up a lot of both tactics and things that you've, the things that have brought you here and ushered in. I just would ask you from a frequency level. You mentioned like 160 is something that you were interested in. You probably have lots of other BPMs and sounds. Is there any other kind of metaphors that you use to kind of pick your music? And hopefully John will just find their way back in, but we'll see. You've talked about attitudes and distinctions about, kind of way, oh, here we go. The things that you would bring, but I would ask just that, like what, from a frequency perspective, do you have like a go-to, a thing that works? Yeah. Welcome back. Hey.
So the power tripped.
Wow.
At least it wasn't the connection.
Yeah.
But yeah, if not to like change moods, but we're I don't want to take your time very preciously, both of y'all, and I know that
from a frequency level, for me, it's a constant push pull. Mm-hmm. Like when I'm performing for people, it's basically moving between these two polarities of like unity and polarization. So like for me, I'm like, I usually start where it feels like people are. Like I was saying, I show up like at least an hour before and I watch the people. And I can see like what they like the most, like where they're really responding. And so I'll start there usually. So that like I get them to trust me. Essentially for me, it's this conversation. I'm like, okay, I see you. And then they are like, cool. When you start playing, they like it. They're like, she gets us. Cool. We like her. Right. And so that's what I call like unity. Like I'm creating unity. Like I'm trying to get us all on the same page. I'm trying to get the room to bounce in the same way. Like all the bodies moving in unison. And then I'll throw them a curveball, and just like, fuck that up a bit, And so for me, there's this constant, it's between moving through those like two frequencies a lot, where I'm just like, okay, cool. Like here's a space that I know everyone can get down in. And then like, here's a smaller space that can be challenging for some of you. And then really exciting for like those of you that really feel me, but like, those are the people that I'm like, like really kind of like, I'm talking to you. And then we go back to unity, where I'm like, okay, I'm talking to everybody. And then we go back to like, I'm talking to you. Then we go back to, I'm talking to everybody. And I do that a lot, So there's this constant, almost like edging or like push pull. That's really important for me in how I play.
It's awesome. And it makes perfect sense. The way you're describing it from the sets that I've heard of yours, that it's like, edging's a word. Goodness.
Someone told me that one time. They were describing after my set. They were like, it's just like constant. You were just like edging the whole time. And I was like, Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Good point.
Um, and do you have a frequency too, John? Do you have something that you find that like a wavelength or like a pattern that you go through when you're doing your sets? If you're giving 110%, you obviously need to like figure out how
Of
to like
course, of
transmit that
course.
down the wires back out to the audience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're always at 110%, it's not 110%.
Well, you're running circles around them then. It's
Yeah,
really tough
yeah.
to like get them on board, right? If they're especially
I
not knowing.
I really like to move back and forth between, in the beginning, I will introduce myself. I'll make sure that I get the energy back. Yo, how you guys feeling? Yeah, 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 is what it is. Play the song, go into it, give a lot of energy. Let's do it on a song basis. For the first three songs, I'll give a lot of energy, and then for the fourth song, it'll be like an interim song, like something just to bring the energy down. Still the same vibe, but to let people know, okay, cool. This is there's a dip in energy because they know they're gonna have to go up again, and then I'll kind of play with that back and forth. I won't always go out front and like jam with the crowd in the front, because that kind of takes away to me at least, the specialness of which song I'm going to go out and let them know, like, okay, let's jam to this song together, kind of thing. um so I will do that. I'll give myself like 3 times to do that max, preferably 2. Once, let people know, okay, he does this, and then for the last song, like my last song is like the grand finale. um but the frequency is, I'd say, 2 to 3 songs hype, and then one interim chill kind of thing. And it's something just still with rhythm, right? There's always a rhythm, but just not the energy levels, not like high hard basses, just something a little bit more smooth and finessed, like even something South African maybe, or whatever, something with those kind of roots. I don't know, something that I can relate to. And so that still keeps me going, because I know people are there to see 4 acts, they're not just there to see me. So I know that I can't let them go balls to the wall for like 1 hour to hour and a half. um so it's, as I think, as Anna was saying, it's that back and forth of, like for me it's like, up down up down. um but it's playing with the crowd,
Yeah.
with them, not really for them.
Hmm. Interesting. And not, yeah, the trough and the wave, right? Like that you're in
Hmm.
the valley of the wave and then you get back to
The
the height of the
trough, yeah.
crest. Yeah.
Hmm.
I feel for that. And it sounds like both of you are, you're doing the deeper work. You have a good understanding of your audience, and also really being inclusive, getting everyone on that wavelength is beautiful. Um, I could talk to you all for hours. Clearly, but we've hit a little bit of a threshold that I want to make sure that you feel the potential that we can like take a little break, take our own little trough, and
Hmm.
let this kind of idea dissipate to the degree by which we've had now this chance to kind of at least talk through this much, and just hope that we can do this again sometime. Hope that we can all individually. I mean, I know you're all probably accosted at shows to give away all the secrets, to kind of to talk through the kind of thing. But I just hope everyone that's kind of tuned in for this long has heard your journey and both felt now more of a part of your practices, and then equally some of the ways that you've navigated that, the toolboxes, Anna's considerable toolbox, and just I don't know, I've loved talking to you both. I really appreciate it, and thanks so much for pulling things back and showing off a little bit about what it is, even though there's
Thank you
obviously a
for
lot more to be said.
having us.
Of course.
An infinite amount of things to be said.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Alfred. Thanks for joining us, John.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And uh yeah, this was cool.
A lot more conversations should be had, and I think we'll be doing a few of them here, and then equally, y'all, if you haven't considered the possibility that you both have like a purpose in not only expressing from the pulpit of the DJ booth, but also to be in having these kind of conversations, leading these kind of conversations, you both are. Yeah, I would just encourage you to do that. I loved your perspectives, and I would hope that there would be plenty more opportunities to hear from you. So I look forward to those, either with you or just listening to it. Again, from the dance floor or from a situation like this. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.